Now, it's not as bad as what Jesus had to experience, and bless us that it doesn't ever get that bad. This week I brought my daughter, I was telling some people I brought my daughter to the mission, San Luis Rey, for her 4th grade mission project, and I've been worrying about this mission project since she was 2 months old, and I'm not lying. Because I knew that 4th grade is, they have to build a mission, you know. Luckily she didn't have to build a mission, but we went to the mission to take pictures and do a scavenger hunt there and all that. And so while we were doing it, it was the first time that she had really seen a crucifix up close, a big one. You know, we don't have one here. So she's never seen it. And she was horrified, as we all are when we first see that. And I had to sit down and explain to her the whole story. And she kept saying to me, in their hands? They put him in their hands? You know, and I said, but he rose. And she's like, but his hands? And I said, but he was born again, you know? And I'm trying to tell the story for the other part of it. But it reminded me of what the horror was. That difficulty, those trials, that tribulation, that pain, that what he experienced had to happen for him to get to that next piece. And so often I think we want the easy way around stuff. I think so often what's happened in our culture is that we want to go what I call the path of least resistance. If I'm supposed to say something and I'm afraid it's going to hurt someone's feelings, sometimes I won't say it. If I think that I'm going to get in trouble for having a belief that's different from other people's, I'm not going to share it. If I believe that our government should be doing something that they're not doing, and there's a big loud voice that's against me, no, I'm not going to share my thoughts just because I don't want to get in trouble. And I think that because we have gotten into this habit of moving through the path of least resistance, we do what's easy rather than what's right. I think sometimes that we are called to stand up and know what we know and speak our truth. And I know that it puts other events in motion. That's what Jesus did. He stood up and he declared his truth. This was about spiritual conviction. He was no longer going to be staying on the fringes. He was no longer going to be keeping his mouth shut. He was no longer going to be avoiding those that would be angered by his message. There's a certain amount of time that it's good for us to hone our message and to get comfortable by being around people of like mind. That's why we love being in church. That's why we love coming to the center. That's why we love being in class. That's why we love being in our sacred circles, because we are with people who see the world mostly the same way. But at some point we have to get clear about who we are so we can be who we are no matter where we are. And I think that that's the message of Palm Sunday, is that Jesus knew what was to come. On some level. I don't think he realized the extent of what he had to walk through, but I think he knew what was coming. But he did it anyways because he knew it was right. He knew it had to happen. How often do we know that something has to happen? That we need to speak, that we need to do something, that we need to be in a clear transparency in some way. And we're afraid of it because we are afraid of what once the ball gets rolling, what's going to come forward. It's important for us to know that we are strong enough, that we are supported enough, and to have enough faith to realize that we were made in the image and likeness of God, that we were called to be in this individual expression in this life for a reason. And that which you're afraid to share is the exact reason why you were called into being. And this may be on a large scale, this may be on a small scale, it might be in your relationship, it might be at work, it might be, I don't know, anywhere. But that's why you're here. Whatever that is that you're holding back, whatever it is that you're afraid to speak, this is the time to do it. This is the time to say and declare who you are. Our spiritual conviction of knowing that we are one with that power, that we have been ordained to be. We have been created to be. Now in this story, I've always been interested in those people who came out to greet Jesus, to celebrate him, to honor him, I love the word Hosanna. I wish we could do that now. When people walk by that we love, celebrate them by Hosanna to the highest. I think that would be a great thing to pull back. That was a joke. In a very important point, in a very deep point. The idea was that I've always thought about is those people who came out to cheer him, were the same exact people who jeered him and called for his death by Friday. We're talking Sunday to Friday. I have always been confused by that. I've always wondered how that shift happens. And what really it speaks to is it speaks to the group mind. It speaks to the fact that Jesus came to teach us a new way. Jesus came to wake us up, that we have a voice, that we are worth something, that heaven is a state of mind and it's here at hand now. It's not someplace later on that hopefully we'll get to if we're good enough and somebody judges us worthy. That's not what heaven is. Heaven, the kingdom of God, is at hand. It's here now. Jesus came to teach that to us and to wake us up. And so what I think about those people was that they're the ones who were asleep, going with the group mind. And again, I want to bring us back to thinking about looking at what's happening now. Our youth are the ones who are waking us up. Our youth now are the ones who are saying enough is enough. Our youth are the ones who are saying, you guys have been asleep and it's time to wake up. And I'll say it no matter, whatever the issue is, wherever you sit on right, left, whatever, I don't care. It's not about that. It's about that we belong to one another. That we are, and they're reminding us of that we owe them. We owe our kids. We owe it them. Because we have lived this life and we have made our choices and we've made our mess that we're sitting in. And so we owe them that we clean this up. And they're just calling us to our responsibility to do that. That's similar to this story. It's so amazing to me. So the fact that Jesus was able to navigate the end of his life with such strength, courage, and faith. He was balanced. He was balanced. He was spiritually balanced. He knew the truth of himself. He knew the truth of life, that it's eternal. And he truly knew who he was. And so we can learn from this now. That we can stay in balance, that we can stay in that truth of who we are even when those curveballs come, even when life starts to get difficult and painful. The Upanishad says this, that life in the world and life in the spirit are not incompatible. And Soren Kierkegaard said, the majority of men live without being thoroughly conscious that they are spiritual beings. And so we know this, right? We've heard this. I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. This is a common phrase that's been thrown around so much in the new thought, new age, new whatever spirituality, that we all know that. I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. But what does that mean to you? How is that real for you? It's okay to say it. It's great. That's a nice thought. But what does it mean? Where's the feeling within you that you know that you transcend this life? Where is it that you know that you are beyond the physical sensations you have in your body? Let me tell you, I had some time to contemplate that yesterday. When I had no control over the pain that was radiating through my body in waves, just because I was breathing. It was really, at least I laughed at it. It hurt a lot, but I thought it was hilarious that I was stuck on the bathroom floor. I just want to go to a quinceañera. I was not going to miss it, and I didn't. But that's a story for another day. But the idea is that so often we identify ourselves with our human physical being that we forget. We forget that we are spiritual. We forget that we are connected to something greater. And I'm going to remind you about meditation. I'm going to remind you about spiritual practice. I'm going to remind you about all these things that remind us and connect us to that presence. And it's the reason why we talk about spiritual practice so much, the reason why I encourage you constantly to find the God of your heart, to find a place where you feel it, where every day you can go to that place and you can remember, whether it's sitting in your backyard with your feet in the grass, remembering that you're part of this amazing gift that is life, or whether looking at the mountain, listening to, powerful music, looking at hugging a tree, I'm a tree hugger, or looking at the ocean, whatever it is that's going to remind you on a daily basis that you are greater than this life, that you are greater than this body, that you are greater than what you think you are. We need to put ourselves in a position to be reminded of that truth. We need to put ourselves in a position to allow for those that we trust to speak that truth to us, to reflect it back to us. It's so important when we are going through our day-to-day lives to do that because life is going to hit, because something's going to show up. Back's going to go out, a diagnosis is going to come, a job's going to disappear, a relationship's going to crumble, something is going to happen. I wish I could say that it won't happen to you. But life, we're living. We've chosen to be here. We've chosen to walk this adventure. And adventures are only great when there's a little bit of an edge to it, right? You can only call it an adventure when we're out on the edge a little bit. And so a life is meant to be lived. It's meant to be experienced. A life is meant to be an expression. I keep thinking of one of my daughters, when I first came into her life, I would take her to the beach and she would run into the waves. She was like 8. She would run into the waves with her arms spread wide open, screaming, "This is joy!" You know? And she would run into the water, and every time, I mean, I took her that summer, I took her to the beach like 8 or 9 times, you know? And we would get out of the car and she would just book it straight to the waves, you know? That's what I think of when I think about us living this life as an adventure. This life is joy. It's joy to be fully expressed. It's joy to be fully engaged. It's joy to be who we were meant to be. And that's why we're here. Wayne Dyer, from the book for the month, which I wanted to remind everybody is back in the bookstore. I know that there were a bunch of people who didn't have a chance to get it. I've loved this book this month, and I'm so excited to have revisited it. And so he teaches us this. He says this: when you're overly involved with the physical to the exclusion of the spiritual, you place a heavy emphasis on winning, becoming number one and comparing yourself to others. A preoccupation with the material aspects of life leads to looking at life in a superficial way, where appearance is viewed as more important than substance. In fact, how it looks supersedes how it feels. What others think is the most important measuring device, and how you stack up to externally imposed standards becomes all important. When you're out of balance, with life heavily weighted down on the material side of the scale, you pay a hefty price. The most serious consequence is that you see yourself in a false manner. Your true essence is spiritual rather than physical, but you're unable to recognize it. When we're weighted down on the human side, life is full of stress and worry. We obsess about things that don't have a lot of meaning: money, status, how we look, maintaining a level of admiration from others. Living this way often leaves us feeling empty, purposeless, and cheated. And so that's how we can tell where our scale is. How concerned are we with how things appear? How concerned are we with how we're perceived? How much do we compare what we're going through with someone else around us? That's how you can tell that you're weighted a little bit too much on the material side. If you've been in class with me, you've heard me say, you just got to get to the 51%. You just got to get to the 51%. And that's the start. We're headed towards the 51% weighted on the spiritual side. Because when you get to that tipping point, when you get to that place where you feel that little percentage more of spirit, then all the doors open. Then all of a sudden, you see differently. All of a sudden, you navigate your life and you know that you're not alone. All of a sudden, things shift and align in a new way. You stop taking things personally. You can allow some of your baggage to be let go of. You find that it's easier to forgive things that before you weren't able to do. And it's all about connecting in to that knowing of your presence. We begin to see ourselves as holy, as spiritual. So it's a conscious decision to see things differently. It's up to us to do it. And life continually tries to crack us open with this. And I'll tell you, because life itself wants you, and you could call it life, you could call it God, you could call it whatever you want to call it, but it wants you to realize your truth. It wants you to be fully embodied as this divine spirit that you are. And it's going to bring up situation after situation that sometimes feels like those trials and tribulations, doesn't it? But it's trying to crack you open, it's trying to wake you up. And the sooner you do it, the easier it eases off you a little bit. And so sometimes we need to pause and say, okay, what is life trying to tell me? What is life trying to show me in this? And maybe it's even one of those days, you know, when you wake up and everything feels great and the sun is shining and everything's wonderful, and then you get into a traffic jam and there's you're late for work, and then the lady at the store screws something up, and then you get frustrated when you have to go to the DMV, and like all that happens in one day, right? You get the picture of that day, right? Okay, what is life trying to tell me, you know? Because you could navigate that same frustrating day with a little bit of peace in your heart and a little bit of joy, with opportunities to meet new people. And you know, I always love going to the DMV because it's a chance for me to see what life really is like outside my life, because it's a little bit different. How we can approach things differently with a different state of mind and a different state of heart. That's the difference between how we navigate as a spiritual being versus just trying to get through the day. Now, Wayne Dyer talked about doing this by making an effort to look at the world through different eyes. I call them his God goggles. He didn't call them that, but I did. Okay, so Wayne Dyer put on God goggles, all right? And so when he put on his God goggles and he navigated his life, he was looking at the different things differently. So he would look at nature, and not only would he see a tree that's beautiful, beautiful leaves and branches and giving shade and all of that, what it does, he would see the energy behind the tree, that life force that was pulsing there. And he would see and he would recognize and realize that life force that is that tree is a lineage of the ages of trees, right? Because that tree came from an acorn that came from another tree that came from an acorn that came from another tree, and it also creates the seed of a forest that it could be as it moves forward. When he put on his God goggles and he looked at people, this was interesting to me. He would see that we're all related. And what he tells a story about this. He says, think about going back a few generations in your timeline, back to, say, Abraham Lincoln, the time of Abraham Lincoln. If we can think about the fact that if you go back to the time of Abraham Lincoln, it took 16,000 people who had to come together for you to be created. What? Wow. And he said if you try to go back to Socrates, that math is just way too big for me to do, and you all know that. Just kidding. I'm not that bad at math. It's my going joke for the spring. But 16,000 people had to come together in the divine way that they did for you to be born in the way that you were born. Wow. So you know what that means? It means that we're all related. It means that we're all connected. It means at the core, we're all part of the same family tree. To have 16,000 people in my family tree be completely separate from yours is not possible. As we back up and those numbers get bigger and bigger, it reminds him that we're related. And so when he would go into a conversation with someone who had a different opinion, when he went into a situation where he was with people of different minds, he would remember that at the core we're family. At the core we're related. And that somehow shifts the energetic on it. It somehow makes it a little bit easier to not be so judgy, to not say it's us and them, you know. Because that's the problem, is it gets worse and worse. It's because we're building deeper ditches instead of bridges. And so we can be that bridge because we can know that we're related. The other thing he would do is he would look at events. And he would see things as energy. And we know that we call to us that which we are an energetic match for. As we think it, we create it, we experience it. As we're afraid of it, God wants to show us that we can handle anything, so it gives it straight to us. So you can say, oh, I was afraid of that, but look, I could handle that. Now, that's not always easy to do. But he would see those experiences and those events as energetic matches. And we could navigate some of these difficult, challenging situations realizing that this is an energetic match to where our culture is right now. This is an energetic match to who we are, individually and as a collective. And so when we change the energetic on it, then we change what we're calling forth into being. And so he could see differently, and he encourages us to practice this. When we practice seeing the world through these God goggles, we begin to remind ourselves on a daily basis who we are. And when this happens, we begin to live in that beautiful, balanced place. And so this is what this is about. For us to be able to stay balanced and navigate the trials and tribulations of our lives, we need to remember that we are not alone and we are not just this human form. We need to remember that there's some piece of us that's eternal and that we are connected to something greater than us. And that wisdom is real, and as we lean into it, it guides us. As we lean into it, it supports us. As we open to it, as we court it, as we invite it, it reveals itself unto each of us. So this Palm Sunday, what is your spiritual conviction? What is it that you're going to declare to the world? And have all of those around you yell the Hosanna to you? Do we have the strength and the power and the conviction to be able to step forward and speak our truth for the jeers and the cheers? Because that is the effect. That's not the important part. The important part is for us to do what's right rather than what's easy. For us to speak the truth into this world at this time, in small ways and in large ways. And so I invite you this week, as we move through this divine Easter experience, that we just allow God to support us and guide us into being the fullest expression that we've come here to be. Because we know in the end, we are fine. And we know that we're not alone for any one of those steps in between. And so as we move our way through this Easter week, as we move our way through those challenges, as we move our way through all of this, we don't go alone. We go guided, supported, and loved by God. And in that, we will rise. We will rise, because that's what happens. And so it is.